Have you ever found yourself in the middle of an argument that started with something as silly as who's going to wash the dishes, and suddenly it became that awkward silence that lasts the rest of the night? Yeah, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but these little everyday sparks can turn into emotional fires when we least expect it. Sound familiar? Maybe it was because of the dishes, the trash that no one took out, the bathroom that was dirty, or even the dog that no one took for a walk. And the worst part, in the end, no one remembers how it started. They just feel that atmosphere hanging in the air. This happens in the best families. And if you've experienced this, you're in the right place. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into this type of domestic conflict, which seems small, but says a lot about how we communicate, or not, at home. And look, hold on, because in addition to showing you why this happens, I'm going to give you practical tools to deal with these moments without turning into a Cold War. Now, to warm up our conversation, comment below one word that sums up your last fight over housework. It could be dishes, bathroom, dog, food, clothes. I want to see if anyone can beat my story. Comment there and leave a like, because today we're going to turn small disagreements into great learning experiences. And do you know what is the biggest mistake that almost everyone makes when it comes to dividing tasks at home? It's doing it on impulse, improvised, or that famous tactic of he who complains least does it. You can notice, instead of sitting down to talk calmly, establish clear agreements, and share conscientiously, most people decide on tasks in the rush of everyday life, in the midst of chaos, between one commitment and another, without thinking about the consequences. And then what happens? A silent imbalance begins to form. One person accumulates small frustrations. The other begins to think that he is doing more than he should, and thus the time bomb of relationships is born, the one that we don't even realize we are setting, but that at some point will explode. Because in the end, as simple as it may seem, the way we divide responsibilities says a lot about how we see each other, how we respect the time, tiredness, and effort of those who live with us. And when this isn't balanced, there's no way around it. At some point, someone says the classic, "But I did that yesterday," and that's it. Fight started. If you've heard or said this phrase, comment here, guilty. Shameless, huh? No one is here to point fingers, we are here to improve together. The big issue is that many people think the problem lies in the task itself, as if washing the dishes or cleaning the bathroom were the villains in the story. But it's not about the task, it's about the feeling of injustice, of overload, of not being seen or valued. When division is done without criteria, without dialogue, and without empathy, what remains is wear and tear. One goes to sleep angry, the other wakes up feeling charged, and the atmosphere at home becomes heavy without even knowing exactly why. And this is where communication comes in as a powerful tool. Dividing tasks is not a simple list of who does what. It's about aligning expectations, understanding each person's rhythm, considering the context, and most importantly, respecting limits. Of course, this requires maturity, but it also requires something that few people practice, the so-called self-responsibility. There's no point in just pointing the finger at someone else and saying you never do anything if you've also never said clearly what you're feeling. And not everything needs to become DR, you know? Sometimes a light conversation at the right time changes everything. Therefore, comment here, what was the last task that caused stress in your home? Just one word. It could be trash, clothes, food, floor, anything. I'm curious to know if your house also has these everyday issues. And the most curious thing is that behind this common mistake, there is a truth that many people avoid facing. Dividing tasks fairly is not just a matter of domestic organization. It is a matter of respect. When you divide right, you are saying, I see your effort, I recognize that you are tired too, and I care about our balance. And that changes everything. It changes the way people look at each other at home. It changes the way they help each other. And, most importantly, it changes the way they feel valued. This is personal development in practice because it requires us to get off autopilot and start observing ourselves, understanding our own patterns, and improving the way we relate. So, the next time that fight starts to brew over a dirty pan in the sink, take a deep breath and remember, the problem isn't the dishes, it's the way you're handling them. And if this content makes sense to you, leave a like, because in the next block I'll show you as divide tasks strategically and consciously, in a way that really works for your reality. But first, comment below. Do you consider yourself more of the type that does everything or more of the type who always waits to be called? Write, I do everything, or I'm called, and let's see who's who around here. The truth is that there is no magic when it comes to coexistence, but there is a method, and one of the simplest, and at the same time most powerful, that I've seen transform the routine of couples, families, and even friends who live together is the so-called weekly check-in with 3 questions. It may seem silly, but here's the thing. Once a week, choose a quiet moment. It could be after lunch on Sunday, before bed on Friday, or even over a cup of coffee, and sit down with whoever lives with you for a conversation lasting no more than 15 minutes. And during this conversation, you will answer 3 questions together. What's working? What are you catching? And what can improve? Just that. It seems too simple to produce results, right? But that's where the magic lies. Simplicity makes room for honesty. And when we create the habit of talking about everyday life lightly, without waiting for a fight to break out, communication stops being a time bomb and becomes a bridge. You begin to understand each other before frustration turns into hurt. You begin to understand what is working, and most importantly, you begin to build solutions together without blame, without unnecessary demands. And now I want to hear from you. Does it make sense for your home? If you think this would help to avoid a lot of wear and tear, comment here, communication, because sometimes all that's left is to give a name to what's being felt. This method is powerful because it takes the conversation out of that fighting over task place and into a space of partnership. You are not there to point the finger, but to adjust the route together with the other person. And that's where one of the most important pillars of personal development comes in: active listening. Yes, really listen. When you stop to listen to what the other person is feeling, without defending yourself, without wanting to win the argument, but really wanting to understand, everything changes. And at the same time, you also give yourself the right to be heard, not just when patience has run its course, but while there is still time to have a loving conversation. What's working? It may seem like a simple question, but it forces you to recognize the other person's efforts, to value what is going well, even if there are still problems. Now, what's catching? It opens up a space for complaints that are often bottled up. And what can be improved? It is an invitation to act together, to create solutions that really work. This is not just a conversation. This is building a bond, empathy, emotional maturity. And let's face it, it's much better to resolve something in a 15-minute conversation than to spend 3 days without talking because of a wet towel on the bed. So comment below communication. If you think that applying these 3 questions every week would be a revolution in your house. And do you know the most interesting thing? This method not only resolves conflicts, it prevents conflicts. Because most fights at home don't start because of the task itself, but because of the lack of space to talk before the cup overflows. It's like the human body. If you feel a little pain and ignore it, it can turn into something bigger. But if you listen to the symptom at the beginning, it gives you time to take care of it before it gets worse. That's what communication is. It's listening to the signs. It's treating them carefully before it becomes a crisis. And when you create the habit of weekly conversation with this light and direct format, you begin to notice patterns. You discover that every Wednesday the dishes accumulate more, that Saturday is the day that no one wants to clean anything, or that someone is more overwhelmed and doesn't even have the courage to speak. This gives you autonomy to adjust your routine, flexibility to redistribute roles, and above all, awareness that living together requires much more than a division of tasks. It requires commitment to collective well-being, and this commitment begins in conversation. So if you've made it this far, leave a like, because in the next section we'll put this method into practice with a step-by-step guide that you can apply today. But first, right here in the comments, have you ever had a conversation like this in your house? If so, how was it? And if not, comment communication. Let's raise this flag together. Now that you understand the importance of clear and constant communication, let's go down another step on the ladder of personal development and talk about something that many people complicate, but which can be simpler than it seems. How to divide household chores without turning it into an epic battle. And yes, there are practical techniques that work in real life, even with the rush, even with different personalities living under the same roof. The first tip is one of the most effective and visually powerful. Use a visible task board. That's right, a board. It can be made of paper, a whiteboard, or even a planner glued to the refrigerator. What matters is that it is always visible to everyone. This framework works as a silent reminder, and at the same time as a collective agreement. In it, you distribute the week's tasks clearly, with names, days, and if possible, times. There is no guesswork, no "I thought it was you," nor that cruel doubt of "but wasn't it today?" Visualizing responsibilities helps to avoid forgetting and also eliminates the stress of having to keep charging all the time. It's a simple resource that can transform your routine. And the most interesting thing is that, over time, it becomes an ally of habit. And if you think this painting tip could work in your home, comment here frame. I want to see who will adopt this idea. The second tip is ideal for those who have tried everything, but feel that after a while, everything starts to weigh on them again. Weekly task swap. What does this mean? Instead of each person always having the same role, as if it were a life sentence to the bathroom or the trash, you can create a rotation system. Each week, the tasks are rotated among the residents of the house. Whoever washed the dishes last week may be responsible for passing the broom this week, or preparing dinner, or any other task on the list. This has two powerful effects. First, it prevents tiredness from becoming a silent overload. Second, it generates more empathy. When you change tasks, you begin to notice the other's level of effort and value more what previously seemed easy. What's more, this rotation prevents small frustrations from becoming accumulated hurts. The routine becomes more dynamic, fairer, and above all, more collaborative. So, if this idea of replacement made sense to you, comment here replacement. I want to know if you would be up to this challenge of changing your tasks weekly in your home. And to close with a flourish, a tip that many people find fun and even playful, creating a bonus task with reward. This is to break the ice of the heavy routine. It works like this. In addition to the fixed tasks of the week, you create an extra mission that is worth a small prize. It could be a treat, a choice of movie at the weekend, a delivery paid for by the house, or even breakfast served in bed. The idea here is not to compete, but to encourage a positive attitude towards household chores. After all, doing something extra without being told to show initiative, care for the collective and commitment to the well-being of the home. And when this is recognized with something symbolic, the environment changes. People start to see responsibilities not as boring obligations, but as part of an emotional dynamic where everyone benefits when everyone participates. It may seem simple, but the reward, even small, activates the sense of belonging, and that, at home, is worth its weight in gold. If you like this idea of bonus, comment here bonus. I'm very curious to know which of these three will work best in your corner. So let's go. Comment frame, replacement, or bonus here below, because your comment helps the channel and can inspire other people who are going through exactly the same situation as you. And if you've stayed this far, you already know. Leave a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and share this video with someone you know needs to hear this today. Because when we learn to share well, we multiply peace at home. You know that strange feeling that grows slowly, almost without making a sound? That thing that starts with a "never mind here, it's not worth discussing there," until one day, out of the blue, you explode. Because of a wet towel on the bed, or because the person forgot to buy bread. So it is. This is the silent error that most destroys peace at home, ignoring the accumulation of small injustices. We swallow, we push, we pretend we don't care, until the hurt starts to set in, ferment inside us. And when it ferments, what was small gains gigantic proportions. Not because it was so serious in itself, but because it became a symbol of everything that was stuck. And this is more common than you might think. Sometimes the anger we feel has nothing to do with the dishes or the trash. It has to do with the feeling of not being seen, of not being valued, of carrying more than the other. And do you know what is most dangerous? This silent accumulation makes us stop talking, stop asking, and start protecting ourselves with the famous whatever. But it's not that much. It never was. And if you've ever found yourself irritated by something seemingly silly, comment here "Fermento," because only those who have been through this know the weight of carrying an overfilled glass without anyone noticing. The saddest thing is that this accumulation gradually undermines relationships. When we ignore small annoyances for too long, they stop being specific and become an internal narrative. An invisible script like, "I do everything and no one notices. There's always plenty for me. There's no point in talking. No one listens." And when this story repeats itself inside the head, it begins to guide our attitudes, our tone of voice, our gaze, even the way we breathe around the other person. Home, which should be our resting place, becomes a minefield of unspoken resentments. Small attitudes become seen as offenses, and neutral gestures become provocations. And then there is no organization tip that can solve it, because the root of the problem is not what was done, it is what was kept. The lack of expression becomes a lack of connection. The lack of connection turns into coldness. And coldness, over time, turns into withdrawal. All this because back then, we thought that swallowing in silence was easier than talking honestly. But swallowing too much also causes choking. And that's why recognizing this mistake is an essential step on the path to personal development. We can't grow emotionally without learning to deal with what bothers us in others, and especially in ourselves. So if you feel like something inside you is fermenting, stop now and listen to yourself. Ask yourself, what am I feeling and not saying? What am I putting up with out of fear of conflict that is eating me up inside? Developing this level of emotional awareness is not easy, but it is liberating, and more than that, it is necessary. Because no one sustains a healthy coexistence based on uncomfortable silences. It takes courage to speak and maturity to listen. Sometimes a frank conversation, even if difficult, is all you need to avoid an unnecessary breakup down the road. If you feel like it's past time to let out what's been saved, now is the time. Comment here "Fermento," just that. I will understand. And whoever else comments will also understand, because this doesn't just happen to you. It happens to everyone who lives, loves, and strives to make it work. The difference lies in who decides to break the cycle of silence and choose the path of consciousness. So, if this video makes sense to you, like it, subscribe and share it with someone who also needs to hear this. Because when we speak from the heart, even the oldest weights start to come off our chest, and the peace that seemed distant becomes part of the routine again. After everything we've said so far about the silent conflicts, the poor division of tasks, the blocked communication, and even the small hurts that are brewing, it's time for us to close this cycle with something that, if done well, has the power to completely transform coexistence at home, creating an efficient coexistence agreement. And look, it's not bureaucratic at all, okay? No notary or notarized signature required. What you really need is intention, listening, and a little goodwill. It all starts with one simple yet powerful step. Write the tasks together. That's right. Paper, pen, or a document shared on your cell phone, and sit down to talk. No, I think, or remember what you said. The agreement needs to be clear and visual. Make a list of all your household responsibilities, and anything goes here, from taking out the trash to remembering to pay the bills, mopping the floor or feeding the dog. Put everything on the table and decide together who will do what. When you do this together, what once seemed like an obligation becomes collaboration. What's more, when something is built together, the chance of being respected increases greatly. It's like a collective pact. We're in this together. And if this first step already gave you a scare, comment here agreement, because just thinking about sharing it clearly is a relief, right? But we know that not everything in life works 100% as planned, and that's where the second fundamental point comes in: flexibility. Because, let's be honest, routines change, unforeseen events happen, and no one is a machine that will handle everything all the time. Sometimes, whoever was responsible for making dinner had a busy day at work, or whoever was going to clean the bathroom ended up having to take care of something else urgently. And that's okay. Having an agreement does not mean rigidity. It means having a secure base. But this base needs to be human, adaptable. So if you couldn't do it that day, instead of pointing the finger or frowning, how about offering help or negotiating an exchange? The agreement is not a prison, it is a reference. And when it is used with common sense, it becomes a powerful empathy tool. Remember, the objective is not to have a house where everything works like a barracks, but rather an environment where responsibilities are shared lightly and respectfully, and flexibility is what prevents the agreement from turning into a harsh demand. It brings fluidity, avoids unnecessary friction, and shows that the most important thing is not who did, but rather that was done, and that everyone cares about collective well-being. So if you agree that flexibility is part of emotional maturity, comment here agreement also, because an agreement without empathy won't even last 2 weeks. And finally, to ensure that this combination continues to work over time, there is a third step that many people forget, but which makes all the difference. Do monthly reviews. Think about it with me. If you go to the doctor for a checkup, if you check your car before a trip, why not also review your living arrangements? What worked well last month may no longer work well now. The routine changes, needs change, each person's energy changes, and reviewing the agreement is a way to keep the relationship alive and aligned with the present moment. Set a day at the end of each month to sit down together, look at what worked, what stuck, and what can be adjusted. Use this moment as a safe space to listen, without judgment, focusing on solutions. You can even make it light. Order a pizza, have a coffee, put on some music. Turn this conversation into a ritual of caring for your home and your relationships. Because what destroys harmony is not the tasks themselves, but rather the lack of conversation about them. When you build together, adjust together, and re-evaluate together, home stops being a place of solitary obligations and becomes a collective project. And if you want to test this model in your home, comment agreement here below and already share this video with someone who shares the ceiling with you. Let's spread this idea, because peace at home begins with clarity, listening, and mutual commitment. And if you've stayed this far, you already know. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments how you deal with these issues in your routine. Because the more we talk about it, the more we normalize emotional care within relationships. After all, you may have already realized that the division of tasks is not, and has never been, about who washes the dishes or who takes out the trash. That's just the surface. The real point is deep down: respect, balance, and partnership. Everything we've talked about so far, from the common mistake of sharing things on impulse to the risk of fermented silence and the importance of clear communication, points to one thing: the way we deal with day-to-day tasks actually reflects the way we take care of the relationship. A well-divided house is not only cleaner, it's lighter. It is a space where each person feels that their presence is seen, their help is valued, and their voice has space. And when this climate exists, everything flows better. Dialogue improves, affection flows more freely, and even difficult moments become easier to go through together. That's why this topic, which seems so everyday, is actually one of the most important pillars of personal development and healthy relationships. The way you position yourself in the face of these small issues reveals a lot about your level of emotional awareness, your affective maturity, and your ability to build real partnership. So if until now you thought that fighting over the dishes was just silly, maybe it's time to look at it in more depth. You don't need to wait for the weather to get worse again to start changing. You don't need to reach that point where an awkward silence takes over the house or where any conversation becomes a demand. Small attitudes made with intention have enormous power to transform the environment. Maybe today is the right time to sit down and propose something new, a different method, a more honest conversation. Maybe it's just saying, let's try to do this together in a better way. And it's okay if not. Everything comes out perfect right away. The important thing is the willingness to improve, because true growth comes from practice, and practicing partnership requires patience, requires listening, requires looking at the other and saying, I trust you so we can build a fairer, lighter and more respectful routine. And if you've made it this far in this video, it's because something resonated within you, some memory, some desire to do something different, or maybe even some hope that yes, it is possible to have a home with less stress and more connection. And that's why this channel exists, for us to talk about real coexistence. No makeup, no fuss. Here we talk about relationships, yes, but from real life, with its messes, its laughter, its bullshit, and above all, its possibilities for evolution. So now I want to give you a direct invitation, for real. If this video made sense to you, if anything in there clicked, leave your comment with the word partnership. Just write that, partnership, because this shows me that you're not just here watching, you're committed to your own process. What's more, if you know someone who faces this challenge of balancing tasks, who is tired of the same fights over and over again, or who simply needs a new perspective, share this video with them. He commands the family group with that, I think this will help us. Send it to your partner, companion, roommate, even your brother or mother. Spread this idea, because changing coexistence starts with a conversation, and sometimes a simple video can be the beginning of this transformation. And of course, if you want to continue following this type of straight-to-the-point human content, which speaks to those who truly feel and live, subscribe to the channel here, because there's still a lot we need to talk about, and you don't have to do it alone. Together, we are building this space where respect, balance and partnership stop being nice words and become daily practice. So let's go. Comment partnership, share, subscribe, and see you in the next video. Let's continue building this journey, one step at a time.